Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we're taking a look at the Eroz Steady X1 Glidecam support, which is a device that allows you to hold the Glidecam with two hands, and of course it's adjustable from there and from there, so you have something that allows you to bring that closer or turn that, so you can adjust it pretty well. Maybe not perfect because this isn't adjustable, but still you can get it fairly close to how you want to hold it. And overall, I think a lot of people are actually going to really like this, because for a lot of people, I guess most Glidecam users, holding up the Glidecam with one hand, especially when you're starting out, it is difficult. And sometimes it's because of a heavy camera, sometimes it's because of a heavy Glidecam, sometimes a mix of both, sometimes they're using too many weights there. People who work out might have a little bit of an easier time holding heavier cameras. So it really depends on so many different things, and this will help. I think pretty much any user will find this helps them hold the Glidecam for longer. And so even users who are already using the Glidecam for a while, they will have an easier time holding it with both hands. Now, will this mean that you get better results? I would say as a beginner, yes, because holding it like this, you get tired. For some people, you get tired very quick. It really depends on how heavy your camera and Glidecam are. For example, this is the HD 1000 and I use it with a small camera. So with this setup, it's actually not too bad. And actually, I normally use either one weight on each side or two. So overall, my setup is quite lightweight, with a mirrorless camera. So not a super heavy setup, but even for some people, that would still be a little, fairly heavy to hold for a long time. I think this could be improved by having this piece be able to raise up and down, or this piece be able to extend, maybe, a little extension piece that can fit in there. Because at the moment, I find that this thing makes me hold it a little too low. Basically, the lower you hold it, the more unwanted motion you could potentially get from your Glidecam, because it's easier to move it the lower you hold it. So if you hold it right below the gimbal, then potentially you're going to get the best results, because you have the least amount of unwanted motion and the most amount of control coming from there, because you need to press harder to actually get that motion to happen. But it doesn't apply to the turning motion. So you can still turn it very easily, but you won't have very many unwanted motions in that direction. So that's why I like to hold it up there. Now, I'm sure some people will disagree and have different preferences, but it is a fact of physics that the further away you hold it from there, the more easy it is going to be to move. Whether that's going to mean better performance is up to the user. For me, it definitely means better performance holding it up there. So I find that this positions my fingers a little too low. What you can do fairly easy is to unscrew these two, and then you'll be sort of, the way you'll be holding it will only be from there. But I think possibly that could be fine. Really depends on whether you feel you need that top support. For me, that really isn't necessary, because I'm holding this without a top support, so I don't really need a top support on the other side. The main thing is that the weight is being held by both hands. Not so much that, because that really isn't slippery. That's, it's got a plastic on one side, it's got foam on the other side, and you can see here I don't even bother using the foam that came with this. I just find it easier like this, without the foam. And so I think that's going to be fine. If you feel that your hand is too low, then you can remove that. And I think you could still use this very well without this top piece, but that might be down to preference. Now, another thing that I think could be improved here is that a cheap version of this would be great. I think if there was a cheap version of this, maybe a version that cost $30 that was more basic, but still did the same thing, maybe didn't look quite as nice, and a version like this which looks nicer. This is all 3D printed as far as I know, because for some people this cost might be a little too much. And of course, this, since it's a fairly simple thing, potentially you could also DIY that and make something like this yourself, because it's a very basic mechanical structure. Who do I think this is for? Well, a professional using this might find that it makes flying a little more difficult, because what you end up with is your two hands are not separated from each other. They're both moving together. Whereas normally, if you weren't using this, your two hands are separated from each other. So this one takes up the weight, and this one is not taking up weight, but has a lot of fine control over that movement, over the turning motion and over tilting as well. Whereas when you're holding it with both hands, what you might find, if you're already used to flying a Glidecam and you're expecting to be able to have that separation, you might find that you might have more unwanted motion in the shot. But for a new user that hasn't had much practice with a Glidecam, what this is going to do is it's going to help you hold it up for much, much longer and then get more practice with this. So this has both plus points and minus points. Now, am I going to be using this myself Well, no, because I've got strong hands, I lift weights, so for me holding this isn't a problem, and I'm using a lightweight camera stabilizer. It's actually a very small one, the HD1000, and with a small camera, so something like the A7S, without any additional things attached to it. So it's, you know, camera and lens, and I do have a quick release on there, which, you know, I'm hoping to get an even lighter weight stabilizer at some point. But basically, I'm flying a system that isn't very heavy, and I'm fairly strong, so it's not a problem. I don't actually need this piece. But when I started out flying with this, I was flying this with a 5D. That's pretty damn heavy, especially for a new user of a Glidecam. And even someone starting out with something of this size, they might find it still a little heavy, especially if they want to get lots and lots of practice with it, which I think is very important. So I would say either get lots and lots of practice with, you know, doing it like this without the Eros, and then you'll build up some strength. And of course there's other methods for shooting with a Glidecam for longer, which I'll talk about in another video. Of course there are big vests and stuff, but personally I actually prefer not to use big vests. I find that, you know, because they're so huge, it's a lot to carry, it's a lot to set up, they're not really the thing that I want to use. This is quite easy to store together with the Glidecam, as long as you're not trying to fit it really compactly into a bag. But if you just want to fold this up, then you have the ability to hold the Glidecam from the handle, because that holds it right there. I'm not sure if that's going to work with really big Glidecams, but for this, as an example, this allows me to carry the Glidecam very comfortably, whereas the other options, you know, if you're carrying it from there, then this thing normally flaps around everywhere, which once again, you could do that and then it prevents this thing from flapping around. And the other thing is that this is specifically intended for the Glidecam brand. By my measurements, the inside of this tube is 23 millimeters exactly, so like that on the inside. And so you need to measure yours and see if that's 23 millimeters, because if it isn't, then this thing is not going to fit. So potentially this company could make different sizes to fit different sizes of stabilizers. So I guess some of you are wondering if this will affect balance. No, it will not. This is just connected to the handle, so balancing will remain exactly the same. And you can disconnect this in the middle or move it to a different position in the middle of filming without it changing the balance of your system. So here I'm holding it with two hands, and this is much easier to hold than just with one hand. If I need to let go with one hand, so, you know, use this some of the time, and then when I need better control, you know, switch to that. And, or I can even move this out of the way and then like that. So it's completely out of the way, and then move it back when I need to use it again. But if you do that, then make sure that it's not coming out of the button there, because that twisting motion eventually might make it sort of come out. Now I'm just going to do some tests with this and without it, and what you're going to be looking for is unwanted motion, sort of shakiness in sort of whatever direction. And the easiest way to see that is to look at the corners and see how the corners compare to the items next to the corner. So for example, right now it's pretty stable, but that would be unstable, and it's much more noticeable in the corners when you're looking at the corner rather than looking at the center of the image. Now of course I have had more experience flying without this than with it. There's the setup of how I filmed most of the review. And here's an example. The pole is sort of moving away from my fingers, so I'm having a hard time grabbing the pole there. So if I change the position of that slightly, then I can grab it again. And let's aim down over here. And it's also worth noting that I have my Glidecam balanced very well. Here, once again, it's moved away from my fingers, or more correctly, my fingers, because of the way I was holding it, my fingers moved away from that pole. So, okay, so over here, I'm going to tilt down into the disgusting sink. Oh no, that's disgusting. Ew. And then let's tilt up, even though there's not really anything to see up there. And this, I would say, is more difficult to control. Once again, it's moved away from my fingers, and okay, let's get it back there. Okay, so then turn towards the photos. So I'm having a much harder time controlling this, but an easier time holding it. And do a turn. Might as well go over here. And let's talk over here. That does bring up another point, which is that for different people, holding this the weight will be problematic in different places. For example, if the weight is difficult to hold because it's sort of hurting your back a little bit, because you have to sort of hold yourself up like that, and you have to lift up with your arm, then holding it with two arms might not make much of a difference. But if the issue is, if it's difficult for your arm or for your wrist, then, adding a second grip, I think definitely helps. I would say the overall amount of energy spent while using it is still roughly the same, but it's easier on your arms. So in all these tests, I'm using a wide angle lens, but of course the image stabilization is turned off. No image stabilization is going to be added in post, obviously. So, okay, now without the Eroz, for me, as an experienced Glidecam shooter, this is so much easier to control without having that second handle in the way, because this arm is completely free to just do that control, and my other arm is holding up the weight. And then what happens when my arm gets tired? Because I'm not Superman. I switch hands like that. And then practicing with both hands from the beginning. Of course, if you haven't been doing that, you can start now, start practicing with the other hand and get practice flying with both hands. And I can do it exactly as well this way as the other way, because I just practice with both. And when I get tired, I don't stop practicing, I switch hands. So for me, that's what works. So here I'm gonna go over there and aim down into the sink, and then up, and look at nothing again, and turn. As I mentioned before, I've had more experience using the Glidecam without the Eroz, but I still prefer it this way. So my conclusion is that this is going to be really helpful in holding the camera for a long time, but might make it more difficult to control the camera exactly as you're used to without using this. And that it would be great if it was more adjustable when it comes to this height, or having an easily removable top piece right here, which, I mean, it's not that difficult, but be nice if this thing could come off with like a thumb screw or something. So really, it depends on your uses whether this is going to be useful to you, but either way, I would say it would be great if there was a budget version of this, and potentially I might make a little video and do a DIY one of these, since I guess some users won't be able to afford this, so a DIY version would be nice. But overall, if you've got the budget for this, and you need something to help you support your hands like this, then do consider this. But in my experience, you will get better results without it for a shorter time. Feel free to ask me questions in the comments. I'll have links to this below. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you soon. Bye. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Visit my channel for lots more awesome filmmaking and photography videos, like lighting techniques, DIY projects, behind the scenes tutorials, cameras, lenses, adapters, shoulder rigs, stabilizers, flashes, LEDs, microphones, bags, straps, studio backgrounds, tripods, float heads, sliders, multi-tools, and lots more cool stuff.